Yes, these long-haired, mentally unstable, petty little hoodlums.
What if I told you that one of the most iconic British films ever made, the very definition of youth rebellion, was almost fronted by the ultimate rebel? That the face of a generation nearly belonged to the snarling, spitting, undisputed king of punk rock, Johnny Rotten.
That you'll be ordered to pay a fine of £75.
I'll pay now if you don't mind. You haven't got a pen, have you, Ronner?
Hello and welcome back to Golden Flicker, where we peel back the celluloid to reveal the secrets hiding behind the world of cinema's greatest stories. The 1979 masterpiece, Quadrophenia, wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural explosion that defined an era and revived a subculture. But its creation was as chaotic, rebellious, and fraught with tension as the story it told on screen. In this video, we're counting down the 10 most incredible behind-the-scenes facts about this cult classic. We'll uncover the on-set riots that got terrifyingly real, the rising superstar who brought production to a standstill, and the full, unbelievable story of why the lead singer of the Sex Pistols was hired and then fired from the lead role. Stick around. This is a story you won't want to miss. Do you remember the first time you watched Quadrophenia? That feeling of raw energy, angst, and the desperate search for identity? Let us know in the comments below. Before we dive into our countdown, to truly understand the film, we have to understand the world it came from. Let's rewind the clock. The year is 1964. Great Britain is still shaking off the gray dust of post-war austerity. For a new generation of teenagers, the world of their parents, a world of quiet conformity and making do, simply isn't enough. They have a little money in their pockets for the first time in history, a burning desire to be different, and a whole lot of restless energy. Out of this cultural pressure cooker, two rival tribes were born: the mods and the rockers. The rockers were the raw, leather-clad heart of traditional rebellion. They were disciples of 1950s American rock and roll, guys like Elvis and Gene Vincent. Their uniform was black leather jackets, greasy hair, and heavy motorcycles, Triumphs, Nortons, the beasts of the British road. They represented a tough, masculine, no-frills kind of cool. And then there were the mods. The word itself is short for modernist, and that's exactly what they were. They were sharp, sophisticated, and obsessed with the future. They rejected the grimy aesthetic of the rockers for tailored Italian suits, fishtail parkas to protect those suits, and sleek, beautiful scooters like Vespas and Lambrettas, often adorned with dozens of mirrors. Their soundtrack wasn't rock and roll. It was American R&B, soul, and Jamaican ska. Being a mod was a 24/7 commitment to style, music, and an almost religious devotion to being part of the in crowd. These two groups were oil and water. They saw each other as rivals for the soul of British youth. And in the spring and summer of 1964, on the quiet seaside resort towns of southern England, this rivalry exploded. The press called it a moral panic. On the beaches of Clacton, Margate, and most famously Brighton, hundreds, sometimes thousands of mods and rockers clashed in violent, headline-grabbing riots. It is this fiery cultural moment that The Who captured in their 1973 rock opera Quadrophenia. And it's this same moment that director Franc Roddam so brilliantly brought to life in the 1979 film. The movie follows Jimmy Cooper, a young London mod who feels alienated from his parents, dead-ended in his job, and only truly alive when he's with his friends, on his scooter, high on amphetamines, and living for the weekend. For Jimmy, the upcoming bank holiday weekend in Brighton is everything. A chance to escape, to belong, to be someone. The film is a raw, unflinching look at the highs and lows of that search for identity. Now that the stage is set, let's begin our countdown of the top 10 secrets from the set of Quadrophenia. Number 10. The Anachronism Advantage. Every film production is a battle against time and money, and Quadrophenia was no exception. With a modest budget of around £2 million, director Frank Roddam couldn't afford the luxury of shutting down entire city streets to perfectly recreate 1964. Instead, he embraced a guerrilla style of filmmaking, shooting on the fly in the middle of a living, breathing 1978 London and Brighton. This led to a host of anachronisms that eagle-eyed viewers have been spotting for decades. If you look closely in the background of many scenes, you'll see 1970s cars. Shopfronts and advertisements are clearly from the late 70s, not the mid-60s. There are even subtle legal giveaways. For instance, many characters are seen riding scooters without helmets, which was legal in 1964, but the law had changed by the time of filming, meaning the production was technically breaking the rules. But here is the fascinating part. Instead of detracting from the film, these imperfections actually add to its raw power. The decision to keep these mistakes in the final cut was a conscious one. Roddam was aiming for gritty realism, not a polished, museum-piece period drama. The presence of the 1970s in the background creates a strange, almost subconscious link for the audience of the time, suggesting that the struggles of Ginny and his friends in the 60s were still very much alive for the youth of the 70s. One of the most famous goofs involves the climactic scene at Beachy Head. A helicopter was used for the sweeping aerial shots of the cliffs, and in one take, its shadow is visible on the cliff face. It's a mistake, but it's a mistake that feels perfectly in tune with the film's unvarnished documentary-like soul. Number 9. The director's vision. Gritty realism over rock opera. When Pete Townshend, the genius behind The Who and the creator of the Quadrophenia album, first got involved with the film adaptation, he had a very specific vision. He imagined something grand, spectacular, and in line with Ken Russell's bombastic 1975 adaptation of The Who's other rock opera, Tommy. Townshend even arrived at early production meetings with a full set of orchestral tapes ready to create a sweeping musical epic. But director Frank Roddam had a completely different movie in his head. He saw Quadrophenia not as a fantastical rock opera, but as a grounded, realistic, and deeply personal story about working-class youth. He wanted to capture the dirt under the fingernails, the desperation in the eyes of his characters. He envisioned a film that felt less like a musical and more like a documentary, a slice of life from a pivotal moment in British history. There was a fundamental clash of visions. Townshend, the rock god, wanted spectacle. Roddam, the filmmaker, wanted authenticity. Roddam had to convince Townshend to abandon the orchestral arrangements and let the story speak for itself, using the original album tracks not as musical numbers, but as the internal soundtrack to Jimmy's fractured mind. This decision was arguably the most important one made during the entire production. It transformed Quadrophenia from what could have been a stylized fantasy into the raw, visceral, and emotionally devastating film we know today. It's a powerful lesson in how a director's clear vision can shape a project's entire identity, turning it from a simple adaptation into a standalone work of art. Number 8. A cast of future stars. While Phil Daniels was perfectly cast as the tormented protagonist Jimmy, the casting director of Quadrophenia had an almost supernatural eye for spotting raw talent. The film is packed with young actors in early breakout roles who would go on to become some of the biggest and most respected names in British film and television. There's a young Ray Winstone playing Jimmy's childhood friend turned rocker, Kevin. Even here, you can see the raw intensity and magnetic screen presence that would make him a star in films like Scum, Sexy Beast, and The Departed. You have Leslie Ash, who gives a heartbreakingly real performance as Jimmy's love interest, Steph. Her portrayal of the stylish, confident Face, who ultimately reveals a deeper vulnerability, launched a massive career in British television, most notably in the sitcom Men Behaving Badly. And then there's the unforgettable Toya Wilcox as the quirky, energetic mod girl Monkey. Wilcox was already a rising star in the punk scene, and her unique energy and charisma practically leap off the screen. She would go on to have a hugely successful career as both a musician and an actress. The film was a crucible of talent, and Frank Roddam's decision to cast fresh, relatively unknown faces rather than established stars was key to its authenticity. These weren't actors playing kids. They were kids on the cusp of stardom, filled with the same energy and ambition as the characters they were portraying. Number 7. The Real Police and the Staged Chaos. Filming the legendary riot scenes on Brighton Beach was a monumental undertaking. Director Frank Roddam had to coordinate hundreds of extras to recreate the violent chaos of the 1964 clashes. To ensure maximum authenticity, many of these extras were recruited from real-life scooter clubs across England. These weren't just actors, they were genuine mods and scooter enthusiasts who brought their own Vespas, Lambrettas, and passionate energy to the set. But managing a crowd of over 300 passionate young people, fueled by the rebellious spirit of the story, was a logistical nightmare. The production team had to implement serious crowd control measures to prevent the staged chaos from spilling into actual danger. They used loudspeakers and megaphones to direct the mass of bodies during takes, while stunt coordinators carefully choreographed the high-risk moments, like bottle throwing and mock arrests. To add another layer of realism, the production hired real, uniformed police officers to supplement the actors playing cops. These officers helped maintain order both on and off camera. Brighton authorities also played a crucial role, helping to restrict public access to parts of the beach and promenade and providing crowd control barriers to keep curious tourists from wandering into the shot. In a particularly telling detail, during some of the more intense night scenes, the production even brought in police dogs to create a clear separation between the performers and the growing crowds of spectators. This blend of staged action and real-world security measures was essential to capturing the riot's epic scale while ensuring the safety of everyone involved. Number 6. The Unpredictable Co-Star, Brighton's Weather. Every filmmaker will tell you that one of the most difficult co-stars to work with is Mother Nature, and the Quadrophenia production learned this the hard way. Shooting on the coast of Brighton meant the cast and crew were at the mercy of the notoriously fickle English seaside weather. Strong, biting winds would whip across the promenade, making it difficult to record clean audio and forcing actors to shout their lines over the gale. Sudden downpours of rain would frequently appear out of nowhere, halting filming for hours at a time and sending everyone scrambling for cover. These delays put immense pressure on an already tight schedule and budget. The beach itself presented its own unique set of challenges. The iconic Brighton beach is made of pebbles, not sand. This uneven surface was a nightmare for the film's other stars, the scooters. During retakes of scenes involving large groups of scooters, the vehicles would often sink into the pebbles or topple over, requiring constant repairs and resets from the on-set mechanics. It was a frustrating and time-consuming process. Yet just like the anachronisms, these struggles with the elements ultimately contributed to the film's gritty aesthetic. The gray, overcast skies and the wind-whipped hair of the actors add a layer of bleak, atmospheric realism that a sunny, calm day never could. It feels real because it was real. The cast and crew were genuinely battling the coastal conditions, and that struggle is palpable on screen. Number 5. Quadrophenia Alley, an accidental shrine. In one of the film's most memorable and intimate moments, Jimmy and Steph sneak away from the chaos of the Brighton riots to share a passionate encounter in a narrow, grimy alleyway. That location, a real alley tucked away between numbers 10 and 11 on East Street in Brighton, has since become a sacred site for fans of the film. It is now famously and officially known as Quadrophenia Alley. During the filming, the alley was just another logistical headache for the crew. It was so narrow and located in such a busy part of town that curious locals constantly gathered at both ends, blocking camera views and interrupting takes. The production had to navigate these crowds while trying to create a private, intense moment between its two lead actors. But after the film's release, something magical happened. Fans began seeking out the alley, wanting to stand in the same spot where Jimmy and Steph had their fleeting moment of connection. Over the years, the alley's walls have become covered in mod-themed graffiti, lyrics from The Who, and messages from fans from all over the world. It transformed from a simple film location into a living, breathing monument to the movie and the culture it represents. In recognition of its cultural significance, the alley now boasts an official blue plaque, which was unveiled by cast members Phil Daniels and Gary Shale, who played Spider, to honor its legacy. Today, walking tours trace the film's locations, and a stop at Quadrophenia Alley is the highlight for many, a testament to how a simple scene in a small alley can create a cultural landmark that endures for decades. And now for the story you've been waiting for. The casting decision that almost happened, the one that would have rewritten British film history as we know it. A story of punk rock royalty meeting mod desperation. This is the Golden Flicker moment. Number 4. The Star Who Wasn't There. The Johnny Rotten Story. The search for the perfect Jimmy Cooper was long and arduous. Frank Roddam knew he needed an actor who could embody the raw, outsider rage and vulnerability at the heart of the story. He saw thousands of young actors searching for that spark of authentic rebellion. And for a moment, he thought he'd found it in the most unlikely of places. John Lydon, better known to the world as Johnny Rotten, the incendiary frontman of the Sex Pistols. This wasn't just a fleeting idea. Lydon was a serious contender for the role. He came in and did a screen test that has become the stuff of legend. By all accounts, he was absolutely electrifying. He channeled all the anger, sarcasm, and anti-establishment fury that made him a punk icon directly into the character of Jimmy. Pete Townsend himself was blown away by the audition, feeling that Lydon perfectly captured the outsider status of the character. It seemed like a match made in counterculture heaven, the ultimate punk playing the ultimate mod. The deal was all but done. Lydon was the choice. But then the real world intervened. The film's producers went to secure insurance for their cast, a standard procedure for any movie. And the insurance companies took one look at John Lydon's name and flatly refused. His reputation as Johnny Rotten, a volatile, unpredictable, and controversial figure who was constantly in the headlines, made him an unacceptable risk. They believed he was simply uninsurable. Without insurance, the film could not go forward with him in the lead. The production was forced, heartbroken, to drop him from the role. Can you imagine how different Quadrophenia would have been? Lydon's performance would have been feral, anarchic, and completely different from Phil Daniels' more soulful, internalized portrayal. It's one of the great what-ifs of cinema. The role, of course, went to the brilliant Phil Daniels, who made it his own and gave a truly iconic performance. But the ghost of Johnny Rotten's Jimmy Cooper will forever haunt the legacy of Quadrophenia. Do you agree that this is the Golden Flicker moment? Number 3. The riot on the beach, too real for comfort. The centerpiece of Quadrophenia is the epic, chaotic riot sequence on Brighton Beach. This wasn't just a fictional fight. It was a recreation of the real-life battles that took place on that very same stretch of coastline in 1964. To capture the authenticity of that moment, the filmmakers made a brilliant and dangerous decision. They cast hundreds of real mod enthusiasts and scooter club members as extras. The energy on set was electric. These extras weren't just there for a paycheck. They were there to live out a fantasy, to be part of the culture they idolized. They brought their own scooters, their own clothes, and most importantly, their own passionate tribal loyalties. And when Frank Roddam yelled, "Action!" that passion exploded. The line between performance and reality began to blur dangerously. The staged fights between the actors playing mods and rockers started to look frighteningly real. The extras got so caught up in the moment, so swept away by the simulated violence and tribalism, that actual fights began to break out between rival groups within the crowd. The crew had to repeatedly intervene, pulling people apart and reminding them they were in fact making a movie. The atmosphere was so charged that it felt less like a film set and more like a genuine powder keg, ready to ignite at any moment. This raw, uncontrolled energy is exactly what makes the scene so powerful. The chaos you see on screen isn't just acting, it's the genuine, spontaneous frenzy of a crowd pushed to the edge, making the Brighton riot one of the most realistic and terrifying depictions of youth violence ever put on film. Number 2. The Sting Effect. A star is born and causes problems. When the musician Gordon Sumner, better known as Sting, was cast as the effortlessly cool mod leader Ace Face, he was a relative unknown. He was the talented bassist and singer of a promising new band called The Police, but they hadn't yet become the global superstars they were destined to be. During the early stages of filming, he was just another member of the cast. But then, destiny intervened. In the middle of the Quadrophenia shoot, The Police's debut single, Roxanne, started to climb the charts and explode onto the radio. Almost overnight, Sting went from being an unknown musician to a bona fide rock star. And his newfound fame caused absolute havoc on the set. Suddenly, large crowds of fans began to gather wherever the production was filming, especially around the iconic Grand Hotel where Ace Face works as a bellboy. They weren't there to see a movie being made. They were there to see Sting. The spontaneous crowds grew so large that they disrupted filming, mobbed the locations, and made it nearly impossible to maintain the 1960s period setting. The production had to hire extra security just to manage the fans and escort Sting between his trailer and the set. Scenes that should have been straightforward became logistical nightmares. It was a stressful and demanding situation, but it also captured a unique moment in time. The film inadvertently documented the exact moment a musician transformed into a superstar, and the chaos on set only mirrored the whirlwind of fame that was beginning to surround its charismatic Ace Face. Number 1. A Legacy Beyond the Screen, the Mod Revival and Beyond. The greatest and most enduring secret of Quadrophenia is the sheer scale of its cultural impact. Upon its release in 1979, the film did more than just tell a story. It ignited a full-blown mod revival across the UK. A new generation of teenagers who had been too young to experience the original 1960s scene were captivated by the film's depiction of style, music, and belonging. Suddenly, parkas, sharp suits, and Vespas were the height of cool all over again. Bands like The Jam, who were already channeling mod influences, were propelled to new heights of stardom. The film gave a name and a face to a burgeoning youth movement and codified its style for years to come. But its influence didn't stop there. Quadrophenia fundamentally changed the landscape of British youth cinema. Its commitment to gritty, social realism, its non-glamorous casting, and its refusal to moralize or condemn its young, rebellious characters created a new template for how to tell stories about the British working class. You can draw a direct line from Quadrophenia to some of the most important British films of the following decades. The work of director Shane Meadows, especially his masterpiece, This Is England, owes a massive debt to the raw, authentic portrayal of subcultures that Quadrophenia pioneered. Danny Boyle's Trainspotting, with its mix of alienation, dark humor, and generational protest, channels the very same anarchic spirit. The film proved that stories rooted in popular music and youth subcultures could be serious, powerful works of art, paving the way for countless films that blend music and coming-of-age storytelling. It is a touchstone, a benchmark, and a true classic whose influence is still being felt today. From an uninsurable punk rocker to riots that felt too real, and from a budget that forced a raw aesthetic to a legacy that defined a generation, the story behind Quadrophenia is as compelling as the film itself. It's a testament to the power of a singular vision and the chaotic, beautiful energy of youth. If you discovered something new today, Illuminate our day by clicking like and subscribe to Golden Flicker so you never miss another story from behind the silver screen. What film do you want to see us feature here in our next video? Let us know in the comments.